There are moments in life that do not announce themselves as our formative years while we're living them. But those are moments or time periods that seem just like another day on the surface, and yet they quietly shape how we move throughout the world. Sometimes what we once considered ordinary defines our abilities in real time. For me, it started with making people dinner. Understanding my capacity began in a cafe tucked inside one of the busiest health clubs in town, where a double shift would often start before sunrise, and it didn't end until late into the evening. This was kind of my first taste of real independence as a youth, and built my confidence from the ground up, so I had real confidence rather than kind of some false bravado. For 6 years, I worked nights and weekends as a closing supervisor in a cafe. So I started in college, and I did that all the way till I got to medical school, moving between the food line, the cash register, the counter, functioning as a barista, as well as a maitre d', walking and roaming the room, making sure our customers are happy. So the whole room kind of functioned as a single instrument that needed to stay in tune. So it's kind of a smorgasbord of my senses. There was really nothing quite like it, and it's nothing quite like working in the food industry. There was a blend of kind of college kids, high school kids, lifers who had spent their years in hospitality, making it their career. So the cafe that I worked at felt like a social gathering, somewhere between a coffee house on a sitcom or a neighborhood bar, if you can imagine that. There were regulars and friends were there, and families and singles, and there was gym rats as well as retirees looking to pass time. This was my community, and I lived in it for a long time. At that time, I would have said I liked being busy, and I enjoyed the rhythm that sometimes would occur when we would have a dinner rush, because it would make the hours disappear. But looking back, I see that what I loved was even more than an activity, and it wasn't just responsibility. It was a particular quality of attention that emerges when our pace is high and our stakes are modest but very real, and that demands our whole mind without overwhelming it. So every evening around 5:30 at night, the room in the cafe would shift, where conversations would grow louder, orders would start stacking up, blenders would be humming, and the grill would be hissing, and for the next 2.5 hours, the world narrowed quite a lot to basically this small, brightly lit kind of pathway behind the bar for us to do our work. And we call this state of being flow. It sits on the edge of madness and brilliance. Flow is what it's like to feel like you're in the zone, stretched enough to perform at your best, yet safe enough to test yourself. This kind of helps you carry a quiet confidence that says, even if I kind of falter, I can recover. And it's easy to romanticize intensity after the fact, but what I remember most clearly is not stress, though there was plenty to do and plenty of that to go around, but a strange ease inside all of that motion. My hands would move before I finished thinking, and my eyes would track, 3 things at once without significant strain, and conversations would be regularly unfolding between the margins of various kind of tickets, as if they kind of were just music and it was where it belonged. I function as a cashier, I function as a cook, a server, host, problem solver, small task artist, and the roles didn't compete. You kind of did them all at the same time. They were kind of braided into a single stream of action that felt almost, kind of musical, as though each order and plate were kind of notes almost that kind of made you have a kind of a pace or a tempo and a beat to kind of keep up to. So what stands out to me now is how little self-consciousness there was in those hours. I wasn't thinking about how I looked or what I was doing. I was just doing. And I probably smelled terrible, soaked in sweat with a stained chef coat, but it didn't really matter. The feedback was immediate, and I really liked that. The line would either shorten or lengthen. A customer would either be smiling or they would not, or a sandwich would be made kind of correctly or it needed to be remade. So there was no room for rumination. There was always just the next task. So without realizing it, I had stepped into a mental state in which my attention was fully occupied. Is where the past and the future kind of receded, in which in effort, you can have a lot of enjoyment where, there's plenty of expression in that engagement, so you can kind of be yourself as well. There was always an opportunity to make someone's day, and I always appreciated that. That is kind of the essence of flow. It's neither a frenzy nor relaxation, but a middle ground where challenge and ability meet kind of at the right angle. If there's too little demand, often our mind drifts. If there's too much, it could fracture. And being a part of that kind of dinner rush every night, kind of lived on that narrow edge where we always had one more order, one more person to say hi to and greeting, one more decision to make, and yet never so much as that the system collapsed or I felt overwhelmed. That pressure organized my attention and quietly kind of helped me kind of narrate my life a little bit. Not everyone knows kind of how this state works. It's like having kind of poor eyesight and only kind of realizing later that glasses exists out there. So you assume that blur is normal for you. So some people move between chaos and disengagement, never quite really experiencing that kind of absorbed middle ground that I'm talking about, where the mind locks onto the moment and the world feels navigable. If you grow up with something, you kind of think it's normal. If you never have had it, you may never know it exists. So I think flow is like that. It's worth talking about. Knowing that state does shape you. When you have felt your mind moving cleanly and responding rather than reacting, when you feel like it's been operating near an edge without slipping over, you gain a reference point. And that reference point not only kind of scatters you, but helps you align your thoughts. So it kind of helps in alignment. And once you have seen yourself in this kind of state of flow, it's kind of hard to forget. You sense when you are below your own standard. And this isn't a judgment, it's more of a comparison to something that you know is possible. And I really like that idea that flow really helps us understand our capabilities. You know, I sometimes laugh at the thought of making sandwiches in a health club may have been my most immersive job, but that humor carries a lot of truth, and I really do believe it was. Later, you know, when I've worked in operating rooms and done surgery, and I've tasted something similar, or working in a clinic, or solving problems, that same narrowing of focus and clarity occurs, yet there's a lot of consequences that cover with that. So there's nothing more serious than the prospect of, you know, harming someone in surgery. So that flow is a little bit more reserved. So in the cafe, the stakes were a little bit simpler. And that simplicity created room for pure engagement and a kind of playful seriousness that was harder to find, you know, when the outcomes are heavier, if that makes sense. So flow isn't tied to, you know, working in a cafe. It's, you know, tied to the conditions that can be cultivated in our lives. So clarity of purpose, immediate feedback, a balance between our skills and demand, and the removal of unnecessary noise in our lives so tension can settle rather than scatter. Flow emerges when what we're capable of, what we're doing, and what the situation requires aren't in conflict. They're kind of synergistic. So beneath our productivity and focus, you know, we often are seeking for coherence, a sense that the work that we're doing and what we're participating in makes sense. So we assume such of these states may be rare, but in my experience, it suggests something kind of more quieter and more achievable. That flow is not an exotic peak, but a natural consequence of the alignment of our mind and purpose. When it happens, it's unmistakable. You know, it can look like a dance. I said it feels like music without having too much of a visible strain. You recognize it also in others, and you feel it in yourself, and it's a quiet precision that it feels like an absorbed kind of presence in the moment. And in its own unassuming way, looking back, I felt that working in the cafe, being a part of Dinner showed me that when the mind is aligned with our purpose, what it can feel like. And it is ultimately something that we strive for to achieve each day. So thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your week.